West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Professor, I'll start with you. Storage, your thoughts?
I mean, the minute he said that, I immediately conjured up the image of a Manhattan mini storage unit where you just like keep your leftover winter clothing and turn it over every summer and switch out your clothes. But this is more, obviously, than just some storage issue. And it isn't even a question of storage. Like the real question is, why does he have this top secret classified material in what is essentially a basement of a country club in Palm Beach, Florida? It boggles the mind that this would actually be the case. So to slough it off as simply a storage issue, I think really underscores the way in which some members of the Republican Party want to just downplay this, when in fact it's a major issue of national security that really demands considerable attention and accountability.
I want to bring in Neil here with a multi-part question, and we'll be able to test, Neil, whether you are on your A game, like when you were in the Supreme Court, where I know they do 3- and 4-part questions at your peril, or if at any point in the question you have to say, hey, I've got a little bit of vaccine brain, I need to pause, that's your right here, okay? So it's a comfortable and understandable bench for you. But the multi-part question is, 1, if you have any thoughts on storage, 2, your interpretation of the special master ruling, and 3, does a procedural win like this matter when it's this late in the review?
Okay, so on storage, I think that it's a red herring. The question is not where the documents were stored, it's that the documents were stolen. And the analogy, to use Professor Murray's point, is if in that New York, rented locker, there was a bunch of stolen equipment and it was discovered, I don't think your defense is, this is just about, where I stored it in this storage locker versus that. It's that you stole the stuff in the first place. And we're now weeks into this search, and Donald Trump has never once provided a single explanation of what in the world he's doing with those documents. Now, with respect to the special master decision today, Ari, I've read some terrible rulings in my life, but this one's pretty much the worst one I've read in a long time. I honestly think that any of my first-year law students would have written a better opinion. I mean, even Bill Barr called this request by Donald Trump for a special master a crock of the S word. And there's so much wrong with it. I mean, just to begin, the judge says that these documents are potentially protected by executive privilege, and that President Biden hasn't weighed in on that question. But the Justice Department actually filed the document from the archivist saying the president delegated to her and the Justice Department the question, is this stuff subject to executive privilege? She says no. She indeed says it's not even a close question. And yet the judge just blows that off entirely. And then the judge enjoins the entire investigation. I don't even understand how an investigation could quite be enjoined. There's serious constitutional problems and practical ones because the government's already looked at these documents, but she somehow thinks that she can enjoin the entire investigation from looking at these documents until the special master reviews that. We don't know how long that's going to take. So there's practical problems with it, and then there are very theoretical problems with it. I'm unaware of any circumstance in which a federal judge has done anything like this. She says, well, it's because Donald Trump's reputation is being undermined. That is what every criminal defendant says. Every criminal defendant would love a special master. Every criminal defendant says they're being unfairly targeted. Every criminal defendant says their reputation will be sullied. That can't possibly be the law. So in the end, I think that there's so much breadth to this ruling that I think the Justice Department has to appeal or at least seek reconsideration and clarification of what in the world she was thinking and what she meant. But in the absence of that, I think this is a real mistake.
All interesting. Do you remember part 3?
Part 3 was the practical consequences. And so I think that the Justice Department has two possibilities here. One, they can try and live with the special master. And I guess names will be submitted in a few days. And the judge did say in the last page of her order that this is just a, quote, brief pause. If it's truly a brief pause for a special master, that's one thing. The problem is that she hasn't actually told the special master what the task is. She says review it for whether these documents are protected by executive privilege. But the Supreme Court has said it's really the incumbent president who decides that. The incumbent president has said, hey, none of this stuff is protected by executive privilege. So what in the world is a special master going to do? So I think there's so many practical problems that I think the department should go and seek clarification. And if the clarification comes back, the entire investigation is stopped. Then the department has to take an emergency appeal, an emergency stay to hold her decision in abeyance so that they can continue their investigation. And this matter may go up to the Supreme Court, but if it does, it should go up on a really quick timeline on the most expedited review. Trump's whole modus operandi is delay. And so I think the Department of Justice has to be very careful in trying to push this as fast as it can.
Understood. Professor, he seems on point to me.
He's certainly on point. I would just underscore that even if this is handled expeditiously, it will involve a delay. And it's worth noting here that the FBI has been stopped from doing anything, although she's allowed the other agencies like the Director of National Intelligence to continue. But the FBI is itself part of the national security community. And so this effectively prevents the FBI from funneling any of the material that it finds that is sensitive and does need to go to some higher authorities, to those higher authorities while this is going on. So it really does compromise national security while all of this is stopped. And I think it is a procedural win in that it basically halts this in its tracks. And even if it's handled expeditiously, that means there's at least 3 weeks, maybe a month in which this is all stalled.
Right, and I would only add to the really excellent legal analysis we've had here that while that is all true, and Neil identified parts of the ruling that are unusual, if you broaden out, the DOJ itself spent months trying to get to this answer. If we fast forward and in a month or two, it's back on track, that doesn't seem to me to be substantively all that different from the road they were on. There's a lot of reasons why you would not expect, as Neil outlined, more experienced appeals judges to go along with this uninformed, error-riddled argument that they can pause entire probes. So it may yet prove ephemeral.
It is Tuesday, the 6th of September of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Oh, and of course, if we are boycotting Hungary, because there's a lot of Hungarian Nazis roaming about, Serb. Yes, do use the Spanish kind. It is just as lovely. And the only reason it's a little more expensive is because there's not as much of it as the Hungarian kind, because Hungary flooded the market years ago and they continue to do so to this very day. Oh yeah, Well, okay, so a lot happened since Showtime yesterday on Labor Day. Judge Cannon, I like to call her the loose cannon. But we'll explain that to those of you. My audience knows what a loose cannon is anyway. As you know, loose cannons will sink the ship of state. Pirates. Yes, should never have been in her court to begin with, but hey, it was supposed to be in the D.C. District Court, not down there in Florida. Talk about forum shopping. Yeah, that's going to be the precedent set. Anybody can go and look for any judge that they pack the court with that has fealty to them. All right. We will find out a long time from now what Trump had on Judge Cannon. Anyway, I'm sure there was some, racehorse involved. Bloody sheets in the morning from the horse head. I'm just saying. An offer that she couldn't refuse. On the other hand, she came from the Federalist Society, and they know exactly what they're there for. Okay. Now, I'm not saying a 41-year-old is inexperienced and doesn't know the ways of the world enough to be a judge. I wouldn't say that, because at 41, you're supposed to be fully formed, right? Right? So we can't blame it on, developmental issues in terms of becoming an adult. Nope, can't do that. So in other words, Trump got what he wanted. A judge put on the court after he had lost the election, by the way. Thank you, Mitch McConnell. Rated very, 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 very low by the American Bar Association. But whoever listens to them anymore? Nobody. They're not even mentioned in any kind of reportage. They used to be the gold standard. Until, Leonard Leo got his way. And the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation became the go-to for the farm team judgeships and other, I have to say, with the Heritage Foundation involved in there as well. The 7 mountains of what the Christo-fascists need to secure to pretty much, have a checkmate. Okay. Oh boy. So the clip at the top there with Ari Melber explained pretty succinctly what is at issue here and the gambit being played, because we are still talking about top secret documents that have probably compromised our personnel and caused their deaths. Can't talk about it, though, because it's top secret, right? We won't really hear about it, but there'll be a star on that wall that Trump went to and mocked. I wonder who has the contents from the empty folders, and we know who. When you got Russian Lavrov and Kislyak doing a jig with Trump in the Oval Office. And now we know what we know now. Makes even more sense. Before it was speculation. It was almost sort of like a little chuckle joke. Oh, yeah. He wouldn't really. Yeah. So I don't understand how it is that the president who was helped by the Russian gets all these breaks that no other president in the history of America has ever gotten. Ever. How is it that this one gets all the breaks? Now, there's all sorts of cliches that we could use, like it's just too cute by half. I always love that one. Too cute by half. It's a blatant rubbing it in our faces is what it is. It's been one slow motion crime spree right in our faces. He's begging us to stop him, and we don't. And he continues on, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. 2 impeachments, it emboldened him. It was like feeding the monster. He got bigger and bigger and bigger. Should we not have fed the monster? Well, we could have, maybe put a little, astringent type of ingredients. Clean them out from the inside, maybe. On the other hand, I think the Justice Department knows exactly what they're doing. And they had planned for this as well. Trump has an MO. He plays it to the hilt. Maybe now is the time when the DOJ was planning on holding back. Well, I would say that, I'm sorry if it seems like I'm jumping around because I am. In terms of the DOJ being stopped in their tracks and the intel community too, I would think that those career people down the line, they continue doing their work, which is exactly how it was planned. And now the January 6th committee steps to the fore, while the DOJ takes a step back, correlates what they have. Because we're talking almost, 11,000 pieces? And they want a special master. Who's going to be that special master? Mike Flynn? Yeah, I'd love to see Mike Flynn offered up to look at our most top secret documents. Give me a break. Jared? He doesn't have a security clearance, but it doesn't matter. Trump said he does. Oh, this is another thing, too. Talking about jumping around. Cannon is acting as if the former president is the current president and has say on executive privilege. Why is that not addressed? Because it's just speculation. My middle name is Justice. Okay? So that's my excuse. Oh my, well, why don't we, as I need to take a little drink of water here, so why don't we tell you inform you what is in store for the rest of the show here as we begin in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The National Labor Relations Board reversed a Trump-era decision by ruling that Tesla must let workers wear union clothing. California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a landmark law for fast food workers. And the military contractor who pled guilty to orchestrating the fat Leonard corruption scandal escaped house arrest in San Diego, cut off his ankle bracelet, and walked away. Oh, also emptied out his whole house. After the break, we moved to the chef's table, where Irish regulators slapped Instagram with a $402 million fine for violating the European Union's strict data privacy rules, especially with children. And a former journalist was convicted of treason by a Moscow court that handed down a 22-year prison sentence after a trial widely seen as politically motivated. Really? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send us those funds once a month, it helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States of America, but representative democracy around the world, and that is the truth. So thank you for your generosity, and we will continue being that bulwark against those dark forces as mentioned. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and you can find those show notes and links by going to my Twitter feed because the links are right there. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Yeah. Okay. Well, fill you in on my visit with Dear Mom yesterday on Labor Day, and there were people working there too. Yeah. She's doing better. Progress is going to be slow, but I'm hoping to get her out of there sooner rather than later. Can't really put a time frame on it. She has to meet certain levels of achievement, shall we say, physically, to be released to home care. And we're working on it, so I will go out and visit with her some more today and see how it's going and maybe work with her a little bit if she feels up to it. We'll see. She is getting antsy about getting out of the room and getting into the gardens that they have there at this facility, which is a pretty neat little place. Not so little. Anyway, but she has to work up to it, so that gives her a bit of a goal. If she wants to get out of her room, she's got to work up to it and get down that long hallway out to the gardens. So she'll get there. It's just going a bit slow at this point. And, yeah. But she has the right frame of mind, thankfully. Okay, that being stated, why don't we tuck into this first offering? This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. I found this in the American Independent, but it is actually penned by the Associated Press. The National Labor Relations Board has reversed a Trump-era decision by finding that Tesla cannot stop factory workers from wearing clothing with union insignia while on the job. The board, in a 3-2 decision, I wonder who the two were, released yesterday, Monday, Labor Day, overruled a 2019 NLRB decision involving Walmart and union clothing. The board wrote that a 1945 Supreme Court decision established the precedent for allowing the clothing. Oh, precedent is for commies, if you listen to the Federalist Society. It ordered Tesla to stop enforcing an overly broad uniform policy that effectively stops production workers at Tesla's Fremont, California factory from wearing black shirts with the United Auto Workers Union logo. My God. The board said, by ruling against Tesla, it reaffirmed a long-standing precedent that it is presumptively unlawful for employers to restrict union clothing without special circumstances that justify the ban. And apparently, just being Elon Musk is not enough of a special circumstance, though I'm sure that Ellen would like that to be true. The board majority determined that Tesla failed to establish any special circumstances that would allow banning the UAW clothing. The board reaffirms that any attempt to restrict the wearing of union clothing or insignia is presumptively unlawful and consistent with Supreme Court precedent. An employer has a heightened burden to justify attempts to limit this important right, Chairman Lauren McFerrin said in a statement. Messages were left yesterday, Labor Day, seeking comment from Tesla and the Auto Workers Union, and it is the second defeat at the NLRB for Tesla and CEO Elon Musk. Tesla is appealing a ruling from last year that found the company and Musk engaged in unfair labor practices in 2018. A year ago, the Labor Relations Board found that in a May 2018 tweet, Musk unlawfully threatened employees with loss of stock options if they chose to be represented by the UAW. Board members ordered Tesla to make Musk delete the tweet and stop threatening employees with loss of benefits for supporting a labor organization. Tesla was also required to post a notice addressing unfair labor practices at the 10,000-worker Fremont plant and post a notice dealing with the tweet at all its facilities nationwide. In April of 2021, Tesla appealed the NLRB ruling to a federal appeals court in New Orleans. Among other things, the lengthy March 2021 NLRB ruling also ordered Tesla to reinstate an employee who was fired for union organizing activity and give him back pay. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Don Thompson. California Governor Gavin Newsom yesterday, Monday, Labor Day, signed a nation-leading measure giving more than 500,000 fast food workers more power and protections, despite the objections of restaurant owners who warned it would drive up consumer costs. The landmark law creates a 10-member fast food council with equal numbers of workers, delegates, and employers' representatives, along with 2 state officials, empowered to set minimum standards for wages, hours, and working conditions in California. Newsom said he was proud to sign the measure into law on Labor Day. California is committed to ensuring that the men and women who have helped build our world-class economy are able to share in the state's prosperity, he said in a statement. Today's action gives hard-working fast food workers a stronger voice and a seat at the table to set fair wages and critical health and safety standards across the industry. The law caps minimum wage increases for fast food workers at chains with more than 100 restaurants at $22 an hour next year, compared to the statewide minimum of $15.50 an hour with cost of living increases thereafter. The state legislature approved the measure on August 29th. Debate split along party lines with Republicans opposed. Senator Brian Dahl, a Republican nominee for governor in November, never heard of him, have you? Well, you will, had called it a stepping stone to unionize all these workers. Like that's a bad thing. Supporters had said they hoped the measure would inspire similar efforts elsewhere. The measure's author, Assemblyman Chris Holden, Democrat of Pasadena, said it would be a way to ensure marginalized workers have a voice in the workplace. Restaurant owners and franchisors opposed the law, citing an analysis they commissioned by the UC Riverside Center for Economic Forecast and Development, saying that the legislation would increase consumer costs. However, Assemblyman Holden urged opponents to give the law a chance. Speaking as a former franchise owner, he said, "I would have welcomed this inclusive process that, in reality, benefits not only the worker, but the franchisee as well." Bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The military contractor who pled guilty to orchestrating the Fat Leonard corruption scandal and was under house arrest in San Diego is now on the run after cutting off his GPS monitoring ankle bracelet over the weekend, federal authorities said. Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal Omar Castillo said Leonard Glenn Francis removed the tracker on Sunday. After police officers found Francis's home empty, the San Diego Regional Fugitive Task Force and the Naval Criminal Investigative Service began a high-profile search. Castillo said neighbors witnessed U-Haul moving trucks coming to and from Francis's home in the days before his escape. Francis was arrested in San Diego in 2013 and pleaded guilty in 2015 to offering $500,000 in bribes to Navy officers. In exchange, the officers passed him classified information and even went so far as redirecting military vessels to ports that were lucrative for his Singapore-based ship servicing company. Prosecutor said Francis and his company overcharged the military, the U.S. military, by more than $35 million for its services. Francis has been on house arrest since at least 2018 and under the supervision of a federal agency that monitors defendants who are out of custody until sentencing. He was set to be sentenced at the end of the month. His defense attorney, Devin Burstein, declined to comment to the AP yesterday, Labor Day. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You were listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Ashley Papp. It's summertime in New York City. Birds are chirping, insects are scurrying, and everything feels alive. While recent heat waves have pushed a lot of us indoors to the respite of air conditioning, the critters of this city were left to fend for themselves.
Many would be surprised that they're going to be doing the same exact things that most humans are doing. They're not going to be pushing it. They're going to be taking their time and seeking those, shadier spots of the park.
That's Sunny Correo, an environmental scientist.
I work with New York City Parks Department as part of our wildlife unit, a small but mighty team that focuses on how New Yorkers can coexist with wildlife in an urban environment.
From the birds and squirrels to raccoons and even the turtles, here's how urban wildlife is responding as the mercury rises. Let's start with the birds.
Obviously, there are a lot of different species of birds that can be found all across the city, from your pigeons to your larger birds of prey. And what's interesting about birds is they don't sweat through their skin like humans and other mammals do.
Instead, birds lose heat through exposed skin, which, if you think about the last time you saw a bird in Prospect Park, there really isn't much exposed aside from their feet, legs, and beak. Sometimes, when temps really spike, birds can pant, kind of like a dog, to get rid of their excess heat. Ultimately, these tactics help, but usually aren't enough during a heat wave. So
they'll find everything from a little puddle from a recent rainstorm, or maybe the hydrants that are open down the street, to fountains, and even the spray showers in our playgrounds across the city. You can find birds that will be seeking refuge in the water to kind of help cool off.
Aquatic turtles can almost always be found near the ponds and lakes of our urban sprawl. On a normal day, you might spot a small stack of turtles near the water. This is because they're ectotherms, meaning their bodies rely on external things for heat. Piling on top of one another or on a warm rock surface helps to keep the turtle's core body at a healthy temp. When things get too hot, like during NYC's recent heat wave, they change their behavior a bit. Instead, they head into the water and spread out.
Basically, they're hanging out at the pool all day. They're going to be floating at the very surface of the water so that they can still get some of the sun, but any extra heat that might be a little dangerous to their body temperature, to their core temperature, they will be able to dissipate into the water.
For fur-covered critters like squirrels, cooling off in the pond or the playground water park isn't an option. When the heat rises in the city, these little mammals can be seen doing a funny posture that's known as splooting.
Basically, that means they're just spreading out on a surface on their stomach with their forelimbs forward and their hind legs backwards, just kind of splat on the ground.
That increased skin to surface area helps squirrels dissipate more heat to the ground, which, under a shady tree in Central Park, is way cooler than the ambient air. Raccoons, on the other hand, have developed a slightly different tactic. They head to parts of the park that have kind of natural air conditioning.
I certainly know of areas that are cooler than others. They kind of have these small microclimates to them. I know where the shady benches are.
In our most recent heat wave, Correo noticed raccoons and humans enjoying the shade of a wooded gazebo that's in one of the cooler areas of Central Park. While the humans sought refuge on the benches below, the raccoons were softly snoozing on the lush rooftop above. Seth Magley is an urban ecologist based in Chicago. In 2021, he started building a network of fellow urban critter enthusiasts from around the world. Collectively, they're called the Urban Wildlife Information Network. They're working to collect information about critters in a similar way so that it can be compared across different cities.
Ultimately, it's all with the goal of trying to create more wildlife inclusive cities. We are sort of also united by our desire to make cities part of the solution to the biodiversity crisis and to help reduce human-wildlife conflict and increase human-wildlife coexistence in all of the massively urbanizing areas around the world.
In Chicago, Magley and his team have been watching their city's wildlife for about 10 years. Altogether, they have over 100 camera traps set up across different types of urban environments, from the downtown loop and city parks to nature preserves and suburb golf courses. And during times of extreme heat,
we do definitely seem to see reduced movement. It seems like when it gets very hot, animals just sort of hunker down where they are. It's probably so energetically difficult to move around when it's so hot.
Although this coping mechanism works for a short-term spike in temp, it's not ideal over a longer period because it means less time to search for food or a new mate. And as Magley and his network of urban researchers look toward the future in climate change projections, they anticipate bigger shifts. Temps everywhere are projected to warm. So wildlife in urban settings and beyond will likely have to shift their normal territories a bit further north to where it feels more comfortable to what they're already used to.
We don't have armadillos in Chicago, but we have them in the southern part of the state, and they seem to be migrating north. And so I'm starting to have to take questions about what are we going to do if there's armadillos in Chicago, right? Which is unimaginable, except on a planet that is warming. There's a million other questions, I think, like that. As a lot of these species, at least in this hemisphere, make these kind of northward shifts, they're going to come into contact with cities in places we didn't expect.
Only time will tell how our urban wildlife reacts to these longer-term shifts in temperature. For now, it sounds like urban critters, so long as they're healthy, are totally capable of handling a few days of extreme heat here and there. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Ashley Papp.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In the world of work, what two occupations might seem to have the very least in common? How about long-haul truck drivers and school librarians? Yes, an odd pairing, but solidarity forever. Start with truckers. The job is literally a grueling haul. You're wrangling a massive 18-wheeler some 500 miles a day for 2-3 weeks straight, putting up with traffic jams, storms, bad roads, lunatic drivers, helter-skelter scheduling, truck stop food, sleeping in the truck, and battling fatigue, aches, your bladder, and loneliness. Trucking used to be a good union job with decent pay and conditions, until the deregulation craze 4 decades ago brought in Wall Street profiteers and fast-buck hustlers who turned the industry into anti-union exploiters. As a result, the yearly quit rate for drivers is almost 100%. But rather than retaining drivers by upping pay and stopping their torturous treatment, the corporate bosses have rushed to Washington, demanding access to an even cheaper pool of low-wage workers, teenagers. Yes, put an 18-year-old on that 18-wheeler and keep them profits rolling. And here's another good job suddenly turned ugly: school librarian. Yes, while student enrollments rise and the need for these nurturers of our society's literacy is greater than ever, their quit rate is soaring, not because of pay or long hours, but because of raw right-wing politics. These dedicated, invaluable educators are literally being abused by demagogic GOP politicians and their extremist partisans who've launched an anti-librarian crusade, including book banning and witch hunting. Come on, how twisted are you to pick on librarians? This is Jim Hightower saying, forget the law of supply and demand. Today's job market is being ruled by greedmeisters and political lunatics. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. The Packing House Workers Organizing Committee, part of the CIO, and Armour & Company signed a master contract. This was the first such contract in the meatpacking industry. Within 2 years, 3 other major meatpackers also signed agreements with the union. By 1943, the United Packing House Workers of America represented over 60% of the country's packing house workers. 2 earlier efforts to unionize meatpackers had not been successful. The Amalgamated Meat Cutters and Butcher Workmen of North America was the first national organization dedicated to the unionization of the meat industry. Between 1900 and 1904, the This union focused primarily on organizing skilled butchers. A 1904 strike proved disastrous. The meatpacking companies used African Americans and immigrant workers as strike breakers. Black workers had been barred from participation and leadership in the union. The second wave of unionization occurred when the U.S. entered World War I, and Southern African Americans began to migrate to Chicago. The Chicago Federation of Labor began another organizing campaign in the stockyards. Many black workers were hesitant to support what they saw as the white man's union. During the 1921 strike, management again tried to thwart workers' solidarity along the lines of race. The strike failed. Many strike leaders were blacklisted for life from working in the industry. The Packing House Workers Organizing Committee recognized that they must be more inclusive in order to unite workers. The union organized both skilled and unskilled workers, and across racial and ethnic lines. When this union rebranded itself as the United Packing House Workers of America, its headquarters were in Chicago. The union's new approach to organizing resulted in the first master contract for the industry. It stands as a reminder of what true solidarity can accomplish.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, under fair conditions currently, but we're expecting to have record temperatures about 105 or warmer today with abundant sunshine and winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour currently. But we are under quite a few active watches. A red flag warning, meaning that high fire danger throughout the region. And winds are actually expected to be steady winds between 10 and 20 miles per hour with gusts 40 and above, which could fan the flames of the existent wildfires, and which will then also cause us to be under an active air quality warning, though the air quality at the current time is good. We'll get into that in a moment. The active warning has us under unhealthy conditions, and air quality will fluctuate. And we are also under what I just intimated at record high temperatures, an excessive heat warning. And all of that is to last throughout the day and into tomorrow. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-60s, not nearly cool enough. Winds will be light and variable. Partly cloudy skies tomorrow with more record high temperatures expected above 100 and more, with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. We'll give updates on confirmed coronavirus cases when they get updated. Ragweed pollen is rated low right here in the mothership area. The air quality index for the region right now is good at 35 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is still in the high range, though at level 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.92 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity currently is at 80%, though it is expected to be below 10% later in the day. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 84 and sunny with an active thunderstorm advisory that could potentially disrupt electrical infrastructure, it being the lightning and thunderstorm season, of course. Rome is 87 and fair. Kyiv is 57 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 71 and clear. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 83 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 52 with showers in the vicinity. San Francisco, California is 68 degrees and sunny with a smoke advisory. And New York is 74 degrees Fahrenheit with rain and a flood advisory. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Irish regulators are slapping Instagram with a big fine after an investigation found the social media platform mishandled teenagers' personal information in violation of strict European Union data privacy rules. Ireland's Data Protection Commission said that it made a final decision last week to fine the company $402 million U.S., though the full details will not be released until next week. The penalty is the second biggest issued under the EU's stringent privacy rules after Luxembourg regulators fined Amazon almost $748 million last year.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A former journalist was convicted of treason and handed a 22-year prison sentence yesterday, Monday, after a trial that had been widely seen as politically motivated and marked a new step in a sweeping crackdown on the media and Kremlin critics. The sentence handed to Ivan Savronov, who worked as a military affairs reporter for leading business daily Kommersant before becoming an advisor to the head of the Russian space corporation Roscosmos, has been harshly criticized by his colleagues as utterly unfounded. Saronov was accused of passing military secrets to Czech intelligence and a German national. He strongly insisted on his innocence, arguing that he collected all the information from open sources as part of his journalistic work and did nothing illegal. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goère. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.